So question and answer on constitutional design. Here are some false statements. Identify the mistake in each case and rewrite these correctly based on what you have read in this chapter. First is, leaders of the freedom movement had an open mind about whether the country should be democratic or not after the independence. So the leaders of the freedom movement, they were actually very clear about this democratic setup to be made after independence. So leaders of the freedom movement had an open mind, this you have to write, about the country being democratic after independence. Next is, members of the Constituent Assembly of India held the same views on all provisions of the Constitution. Now, whenever there is an assembly or there is a committee being made, then there are so many people in this Constituent Assembly. Around 299 people were there. Now, they were discussing on different matters because it was Constitution of India. So, the views will be different. But after long discussions and debate, they actually came to consensus. So, members of the Constituent Assembly of India had different ideas on all provisions of the Constitution. They arrived at a solution only after long discussions and debates, and a consensus was reached. A country that has a constitution must be a democracy. Now, this is not necessary. If a country is democratic, a democracy, following democracy, then the country should have a constitution, but the otherwise may not be true. So it is not necessary that a country having constitution must be a democracy. The constitution of country can even make provisions for dictatorship or monarchy. What we have seen in Soviet Union and Pakistan is an example. Constitution cannot be amended because it is the supreme law of country. Constitution, let me tell you one thing, the change is the only thing which never changes. That is, change is the only permanent thing. So it is obvious for constitution also there can be amendments or changes. So the constitution can be amended, changed to keep up with the changes in aspiration of the society. It can also be changed keeping in mind the social, political and economic conditions of the country. Which of these was the most salient underlying conflict in the making of democratic constitution in South Africa? And this was the fight against the apartheid system between the white majority and the black minority. So this is the answer. Which of these is a provision that a democratic constitution does not have? Name of the head of the state, that is the prime minister or president. We don't have the name, but we have in constitution powers of the head of the state. We do have the powers of the legislature and the name of the country. Matching of these leaders with their roles in making of the constitution. So Motilal Nehru, he prepared a constitution, or you can say a prarup or a khaka, blueprint of constitution for India in 1928. B.R. Ambedkar, he was chairman of the drafting committee. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, he was president of the Constituent Assembly. And Mrs. Sarojini Naidu ji, she was the member of the Constituent Assembly. Read again the extracts from the Nehru speech, Tryst with Destiny, and answer the following. Why did Nehru use the expression not wholly or in full measure in the first sentence? So the expression, this one, not wholly or in full measure, in the first sentence was used by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru because he thought that the task they had undertaken was incomplete and it wasn't possible to fulfill the pledges all at once, but would be gradually fulfilled. What pledge did he want the makers of the Indian Constitution to take? The pledge that he wanted the makers of Indian Constitution to take was to dedicate their lives in the service of India, Indians and humanity at large. The ambition of greatest man of our generation has been to wipe every tear from every eye Who was he referring to? He was referring to Mahatma Gandhi ji. Here are some of the guiding values of the Constitution and their meaning. Rewrite them by matching them correctly. So, sovereign means people have the supreme right to make decisions. Republic means head of the state is an elected person. Fraternity means people should live like brothers and sisters, like a family. And secular means government is not going to favor any religion, any specific religion. A friend from Nepal has written you a letter describing the political exercises or situation there. Many political parties are opposing the rule of the king. Some of them say that the existing constitution given by the monarch can be amended to allow more powers to elected representatives. Others are demanding a new constituent assembly to write a republican constitution. Reply to your friend giving your opinions on the subject. So this is how you can write. Dear, you can choose a name. I read your letter. These are exciting times indeed for you, and different times. My country has been independent for almost 60 years now, and we have already gone through the whole process of establishment of democracy. Fortunately, it has survived on this soil as well. I just hope the same happens in your country, Nepal. I find myself hoping that the demand for a new constituent assembly would take root in Nepal. A republican constitution has its benefit. In countries like your and mine, there is already too much wastage in terms of government expenditure. Unfortunately, such is the reality of our national culture. In addition, if Nepal has a constitutional monarchy, a lot of money would be spent on maintaining the high standards of living for the royalty, that is the royal family. The United Kingdom has a constitutional monarchy, but it can also afford it. Centuries and centuries of colonial exploitation of other countries has its benefits. However, in my opinion, for countries like us, India and Nepal, a republican government is best suited. By all means, the constitution offered by your king can hardly be called democratic. It hardly gives any power to any parliament or the civil government. So that's what I have heard. Nevertheless, whatever I might think as a foreigner, the people of Nepal will be the best judge of your country's political future. So let's see what happens. So I have heard the Maoists are making some inroads in the rural heartland of Nepal. I don't personally support violence of any kind, and I'm a believer in democracy. However, the Maoists intrigue me to no limit. What is the attitude towards India? What do they think about the Chinese? Do let me know what you think. Your friend, you can put your name here. How are different opinions about what made India democracy? Here are some different opinions. How much importance would you give to each of these factors? The first is, democracy in India is a gift of British rulers, those who ruled us for 200 years. We received training to work with representative legislative institution under the British rule. For this, you can say, though I would acknowledge many times or many good things we learned from the British rulers, and democracy being one of them, I wouldn't say the democracy was gift by them. Indians had to struggle a lot and make many sacrifices to attain freedom from this British rule, colonialism. These circumstances helped people to gain the experience and training in working of the legislative institutions. Next is, freedom struggle challenged the colonial exploitation and denial of different freedoms to Indians. Free India could not be anything but democratic. You can say that, yes, free India could not be anything but democratic because the people had already suffered a lot under the British rule. This made them realize that for people to have a say in ruling the country, it was necessary to make India a democratic country. Next one is, we are lucky to have leaders who had democratic convictions. The denial of democracy in several other newly independent countries shows the important role of these leaders. So you can say it is indeed true that we are lucky to have leaders who had deep democratic values, or they think about the country to be democratic. It is because of these ideals that India freedom struggle can be considered as the only example of bloodless freedom struggle in the contemporary history. Therefore, absence of such ideals have made many countries undemocratic. Here it is being said, read the following extract from the Conduct book for married women published in 1912. This says God has made a female species delicate and fragile, both physically and emotionally. Pitiably incapable of self-defense, they are destined thus by God to remain in male protection of father, husband, son all their lives. Women should therefore not despair but feel obliged about what they can dedicate themselves to the service of the men. Do you think the values expressed in this paragraph reflected the values underlying in our constitution, or does this go against the constitutional values? So answer here is, this paragraph does not reflect the underlying value in our constitution. It refers to the patriarchal views and endorses the thought of inequality in genders. It goes against the constitutional values because in the paragraph women was shown as inferior, unequal, as weak and fragile, who should serve men. However, the constitution has provided equal rights to women. They enjoy the right to vote. They can take up any job and are paid equal wages for the same work. Read the following statement about constitution. Give reason why each of these is true or not. So the authority of the rules of the constitution is the same as that of any other law. Now this is not true, because an ordinary law is passed by the parliament and cannot be changed by its own will. So on the other hand, the rules of the constitution have greater authority and the parliament has to abide by them. For amending these rules, special procedures have to be adopted. Constitution lays down how different organs of government will be formed. So this is true. The constitution has laid down the framework of government formation. It has put in place the structure, power and functions of these three organs of the government, that is the executive, the legislative and the judiciary. Rights of citizen and limits on the power of the government are laid down in the constitution, and this is also true. The rights of the citizens are laid down in the constitution as fundamental rights, which are enforceable by law. The powers and functions of the government are divided into executive, legislative and judiciary. So it is done to keep each organ under check by other organs to ensure power functioning of the government. Next one is, a constitution is about institutions, not about values. And this is not true, because the constitution is the supreme law of the country. It lays down the composite or composition powers and functions of the various institutions of the government. The constitution is guided by the values which are found in the form of preamble, prastavana, principles and values such as equality, liberty, fraternity, brotherhood, secularism and justice. These are included in the preamble of the constitution. So these were the question and answer of this topic. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.